In this introduction to life, I want to explore what I think is one of the most important and difficult to understand frameworks for understanding evolution and human behavior. So, the first thing to understand is that there are four distinct operating systems that relate to four distinct areas of the brain, stages of brain development, which correspond to stages of consciousness development. So the first area is the reptilian brain. This is the oldest brain, and it is the brain that is responsible for survival in a sociopathic environment. Now, socio, people, social, pathic, disease. A disease is something that is acting out of sync with the whole. Like cancer is incredibly healthy, but it's acting out of sync with the body. So our language for that is dis-ease or illness. Sociopathic is a dis-ease, meaning it's a behavior or an individual or a small group that is behaving out of sync with the rest of the species or the rest of the community in such a way as to create imbalance, disorder, pain, or death. The reptilian brain is the brain that is responsible for facilitating animal and human life in a sociopathic environment. Now, a sociopathic environment is defined by fight, flight, freeze, and please. Fight applies to an opportunity to extract resources out of fear through superior mass. The law of mass is the physiological and psychological dynamic of, or that's represented by the pinball and the bowling ball. So the pinball is very small, the bowling ball is very big, and the law of mass says that when these two collide, the smaller object, the pinball, will go bouncing off, and the bowling ball will continue its original trajectory. Right? When a small person collides with a big person, when a poor person collides with a rich person, when a powerful person collides with a powerless person, when a gang collides with an individual, that the larger object, the object with the most weight, whether it's psychological weight, financial weight, emotional weight, physical weight, that object will continue and the smaller object will be deflected in whatever angle they collide, right? And so if a pinball collides with a bowling ball at this angle, it'll bounce off here. But the bowling ball will continue. Now, in a sociopathic paradigm, the bowling ball, human beings that have superior mass, so a larger company, if you read the history of Microsoft, for example, you will see numerous occasions when competent small companies were doing something that Microsoft didn't want them to do. And so Microsoft would bully with money, it would bully with attorneys, it would barrage, it would threaten competition. It would make various vendors sign that they wouldn't do business with a small company, et cetera, because they could, right? And the goal of Microsoft was to drive these companies out of business so that they could not compete on the basis of merit, right? And so this is a very important thing because many companies, anyone who's lived through 30 years of Microsoft knows that Microsoft Windows is among the crappier pieces of software, ever created. But it managed to accrue size. Microsoft, the company, through cash reserves and careful planning of Bill Gates, et cetera, managed to get monopoly distribution and get big enough that it didn't need to compete on quality. It didn't need to compete on schedule, meaning Windows was a crappy software with an enormous amount of inefficient code that was always late. I think Windows 95 came around in 1998 or whatever, and just constantly late, by years, and would even get worse, right? There'd be whole batches of Windows that, were dead on arrival. They were so late and so terrible by the time they arrived that, the only thing Microsoft could do is say, well, we're working on the next release. And so the question is, how does such an unreliable, crappy software with a company that will sell backdoor and back-end information, right, to various other companies for a fee to get access, to be bundled in, or to be able to circumnavigate security patches, how does such a crappy company with such crappy software dominate the software marketplace? And the answer is mass, right? Now, on the other side of the continuum is the law of intelligence. So you have the law of mass, which is the prevailing law in a reptilian paradigm, in a sociopathic paradigm. On the other side, you have the law of intelligence. And the law of intelligence relates to the bell curve. And what the bell curve of innovation and adaptation says is that at the beginning of every invention, of every innovation, there is one, there are three, there are five people that have the idea, that are on the bleeding edge of that innovation. And if they are successful at overcoming the law of mass, right? The law of mass says that whenever a large object collides sociopathically with a small object, the small object is crushed and the large object wins. But when you are in a sociopathic environment, you have multiple large objects in many cases. In totalitarian states, not necessarily so, but in capitalism, you have feuding companies and you have feuding competing billionaires. And so Google, for example, might fund a very small but competent operating system like Linux specifically to undermine Microsoft's dominance, right? And so a very small group of people that are working, hard to create a better operating system with a very low budget compared to Microsoft might get support from a large company like Google specifically to undermine their rival, right? And so in this environment, a small group of people have a chance to win. And the only way evolution and innovation occur is when a small group of people are not killed by the bigger group, are not so terrorized, killed financially, killed socially, killed are not killed by the bigger group and have a chance to get a foothold. And often, how this occurs is, first of all, through ridicule and absurdity. This whole thing is laughable. You can go back to the time when cell phones were being invented in the 80s and 90s. And, you know, they were a joke. Huge, expensive, and, you know, they would be called a brick, basically, because they were about the size of a brick. And, you know, the whole thing was a joke. So that's the first stage of a cutting-edge technology. A few people believe in it. Everyone else thinks it's a joke. It's unnecessary. And then it gets adopted by the early adopters. That group is important, and it's bigger than the early innovators. And then the prices go down, it gets more useful, and it goes more and more mainstream. And then eventually, it is the dominant technology. And so the law of intelligence says that the leading technology, the leading design, the newest innovation is always held, protected, being developed by the smallest number of people, right? So what this is basically saying is that the law of mass dictates that in a collision, the big body of energy always beats the little body of energy. But the little body of energy is the more intelligent. Now, it's not always. There is a twist to this, because you also have the very end, right? At the very end, right? There are still a few people, a distinct minority of people that ride horses to work. They're at the end of a bell curve, right? So you start with, you start with something like, going on foot. Then a small group of people learn to ride horses. Other people see the benefit, and more people ride horses. Then everyone rides horses except a few people who can't afford horses. Then the automobile comes along. People stop riding horses and start riding the automobile, and a very tiny amount of people still ride horses, right? So at the beginning of a bell curve of innovation and at the end, you have a very small minority of people. The first are at the bleeding edge of innovation, growth, and intelligence. The latter are either not caught up with the times, or they're in love with the past, they're nostalgic, or they're poor, or they're dumb. They don't get it, that there's a better way to get to work than horses, right? They gallop along a little bit, have to clean up the manure, gallop along, get to their 1 hour commute 2 days late, and they don't get it, right? So you have the bleeding edge and you have the laggards, right? That just don't get it, or the nostalgic, both occupying a position, around over the course of a bell curve of adoption. And so in any given moment in time, if you come across an intelligent group of people, they will always be a minority, and they will be vulnerable to a collision with the majority. Hitler was quick to banish the most prestigious and world-renowned physicists to the United States, right? Because most of the leading physicists had Jewish ancestry. The leading place in Germany in the 20s, etc., for physics and science was Germany. Germany was the leader in science and in physics, in all number of measures, And once Hitler came to power with the majority kind of aligned in hate to scapegoat the Jews, they targeted Einstein. So Einstein is one and the most, or one of the most intelligent people in Germany, right? But in a collision with racism, racism wins. Racism often has a majority. It's unusual. It's South Africa is, a different example. South Africa, a very small number of white people attempt to dominate a majority of black people. But in most cases, racism is not a very courageous act. It's not a very intelligent act because it simplifies things, right? If you're intelligent, you look at the individual and you look at Einstein and say, clearly ahead of the typical Aryan, right? Smarter, more self-deprecating, better sense of humor than the average German, right? But there's an unfortunate reality. It's not Dunbar. I wish I remembered the name, but research around competency has shown that the only people capable to evaluate who is and is not competent are the top 5 to 20% of people. So in the 80-20 principle, there's a very important bell curve that is showing that the top 20% of intelligence are significantly more intelligent than the bottom 80%. Right? And so that there's a very important statistical pattern that comes again and again in this 80-20 principle, which ties into the Pareto principle, which is that a very small minority, and then a very small minority of the minority, right, is generating most of the value, capturing most of the money, having most of the intelligence, creating most of the productivity, right? You'll find that less than 20% of the population, for example, does 80% of the inventing. You'll find that less than 20% of people have 80% of the money. In any system that is allowed to develop organically, there is a concentration of most of something, whatever it is, money, power, intelligence, innovation, warmth, in a small minority of people. And it's expressed simply as the 80-20 principle. But it could just as easily be the 90-10 principle. Because once you take the 20%, 80% of those 20% are richer than the other 80% or are smarter than the other 80%, et cetera. So this is a phenomena. And it's these laws, the law of intelligence and the law of mass, are in tension with one another, right? Because the most intelligent people know who else is intelligent, because it takes intelligence to evaluate intelligence. Like if you're the best auto mechanic in the world, you can glance at a shop and know how good that auto mechanic is. If you're the best auto mechanic in the world, you glance at a shop and you will say, I've seen 1,000 different ways to organize a shop. On a 1 to 10 scale, this is a 5, or this is a 7, or this is a 10. I know the best tools in the industry. And the tools here are 1, 2, 3. They show a lack of understanding of which tools are the best tools for the job and which tools are going to last and which tools are the most efficient to operate. But the average mechanic looks at that same shop and doesn't know if this is a good mechanic or not, because the average mechanic is not good enough to evaluate that, right? And so you have a phenomena where the majority of people in any system, the majority of any group, lack the competency to evaluate who has and who doesn't have competency. And in a democracy, an uneducated, incompetent population elects not the most competent leader, because that would require competency to evaluate. They elect who makes them feel good from an uneducated point of view, right? So, you're going to get a tension between a very small group of people who understand what's going on, who understand what is good, and a majority of people who have the power, not based on competency, but on the law of mass. Because in a democracy, the majority will vote for whatever idiot they like, meaning that makes them feel good, and will pass laws and bills that an uneducated majority thinks are a good idea. And the distinct minority that understands that's not the best leader, and that's not the best law, and that's not the best way to write that law, does not get a voice, right? Because in order for them to get a voice, there would have to be an electorate that were as smart or smarter than them that could recognize intelligence, right? So there's this very important law and tension, this battle between intelligence and mass. The most intelligent is never the biggest. The best run company is not the biggest company. The most efficient bricklayer is not the biggest brick company. And something like bricklaying, you can at least evaluate how many bricks an hour are laid. In areas of philosophy and long-term cycles and different paradigms, you don't even know what to measure, right? And so a very small minority of people know the direction of which people are going, but the majority is not intelligent enough to pick them out from the crowd and give them an opportunity. Now, the reptilian brain is the brain that helps us survive, that helps alligators, helps snakes, helps evolution occur in a sociopathic environment. Now, the sociopathic edict is fight and feed when you are bigger. We're talking about the law of mass. Then a prey. Fight and feed. Flight or run when there is a bigger entity that is chasing you. So fight what is smaller than you, right? You could call that cowardice, or you could call it effective, right? It's called bullying, right? You see, you don't run and wrestle with a grizzly bear. You try and kill a cow, right? Let's eat cow. Let's not eat grizzly bear. Why? Because the grizzly bear is faster, more dangerous, bigger. Right? Let's eat cow. It's easier, right? And the cow doesn't fight. So we eat cow, We don't breed grizzly bears. It's more work, right? So flight or run when there is a predator that could feed on us. Hide or freeze when those options are not expedient. Like, if you're standing in the middle of a battlefield and you've got people coming to you from all directions, you don't run into one of them. You just stand there, and see who's going to kill you first, or you try and hide. So this is the freeze protocol. That is a conservation of energy in a sociopathic environment where neither running or fighting seems practical. And finally, you have the betrayal, ass-licking, or please protocol. Now this is, you see it all the time in movies, right? The enemy is caught, is about to behead or kill, right? One of the hostages. And the hostage said, no, don't kill me. I will turn on my friends and I can be useful to you, right? When Timothy Leary was imprisoned finally for promoting, LSD in the United States, when Timothy Leary was imprisoned and didn't look like he was going to get out, he made a plea deal that to turn other people in to get out of prison, right? And so this is the betrayal of one's friends in order for survival. So this is also what employees do every day of the week in large corporations that are harming the species or planet as a whole, but providing good paychecks for the employees, right? You get to survive, but you've got to help us do things that are not that great for other people, right? How do you get, how do you get people to kill other people, right? How do you facilitate wars? Well, your family will be taken care of, you'll be given a paycheck, but you've got to kill these other people, right? So it's the please ethic. I will please someone in power if overall it seems like my life will improve, my life. So we're still in sociopathic territory where it's sacrifice the whole, sacrifice the group, or sacrifice the individual in order to facilitate my survival. So we have a series of battle happening in the sociopathic paradigm on all sides. There is energy competing for energy. And the question is, who is going to win? And the person who wins is, for example, in the sociopathic domain, the person that secures the most trust and then betrays the most people and then plans an escape, right? The CEO of a company that gets a golden parachute while 50,000 employees are laid off and a town goes dead because they helped the shareholders. So the shareholders and the CEO have a pact, right? That we'll make a lot of money if we move this business offshore. And yeah, there will be a few suicides. Yes, there will be a lot of alcoholism. Yes, there will be a lot of spousal abuse. And yes, an economy in this town is going to go dead. Yes, property values for them are going to tank. But for us, we're going to save 5% in net profit. And we're going to distribute that to the shareholders. So it's a win-lose. In sociopathic territory, it's a win-lose dynamic, right? So somebody wins, somebody loses, and that's, the way it goes. And in that paradigm, you want, right, from a survival point of view, from a competitive point of view, you want to be the winner. So this is the first operating system. It's the oldest, it's the simplest, it's the crudest, it's reptilian. Capitalism, politics, a lot of sexual behavior of a more, the predatory aspect of I want to have this experience with you. Who do I have to manipulate, bully, do, etc., to compete, to be the alpha, and to secure dominance, right? So this is well before love. We're talking about greed, we're talking about lust, we're talking about fear, and winning, right? I don't even like this person, but you can't fuck her, right? Why? Because I'm bigger. Because I can fire you, in the olden days, they would, if the princess or the queen was fond of one of the lower ranking men, then the king would send them out to the battle in the front lines and even kill, hundreds of their own people just to kill off a rival. Right? And similar in politics, right? Let's set this person up to fail. Let's appoint them and damage the country just to kill the rival. Because in a sociopathic environment, the people don't really matter other than you have to pretend that they matter so that they won't revolt, right? So this is reptilian territory. Now, every person has a reptilian brain. It's the oldest brain. And the way to feed this reptilian brain is with pain. The more pain, the more trauma that is directed towards an individual, the more blood will go to their reptilian brain. Because what that blood is telling them biologically is you are surrounded by reptiles. You are surrounded by a group of people that is sending you a lot of pain, and no one is doing anything about it. You're in the land of snakes. And so if you don't do something to send that pain back to the people that are giving it to you, you're going to be captured. You're going to be made the scapegoat in this reptilian territory. You're going to be the fall guy. And so when you realize that you are in a reptilian environment. And the way that you know that is your pain is going up and people are not responding, they're making it worse. There is a counterbalance within that brain to try and attack and undermine the system and people that are doing that. That system is not your friend. If you're poor in a capitalist cult, where the richest people are using the fact that you're poor to make you even poorer by cutting off, like you try and open a business and Microsoft sends, 100 attorneys to take up all your savings. If you're surrounded by reptiles, you need to do a couple of things. You need to get out of that situation and go somewhere else where there are human beings. You need to fight and play dirty, right? You need to create mass, for example, by creating scandal, right? You may be a small person, but if you have the evidence that can bring down Microsoft and tie it up in federal court, well, then you might be able to negotiate your release. If Microsoft doesn't kill your company, you will not, destroy Microsoft with that evidence, right? But it's a dicey thing because they could kill you, right? Not necessarily directly, right? Because you can threaten to kill someone, Right? You can kill their dog. You can send little messages saying that we know where your kids are, etc. You can destroy a marriage. Right? So this is all the territory of the reptile. It's not human. It's snakes. In mythology, we're in the terrain of the devil. We're in the terrain of the demon. We are in the terrain of fire, which is the terrain of pain and the fear of pain. And you secure the loyalty of the majority by threatening the most fear and promising the most pleasure. It's fear and greed in the reptilian territory. So, and this is all, very instinctive. Now, this gets a bad rap, right? Fear, pain, reptiles, sociopathic behavior, etc. So the question is, what's life up to with this protocol? Like, why is life starting with the reptilian brain? Well, in the reptilian brain, there is a global competition for scarce resources, right? Global competition for power, for money, for sex, for status, for weaponry, for intelligence, for brawn, right? For dominance. A global competition for speed, right? This dinosaur is trying to eat this dinosaur out from the inside. This dinosaur is trying to just bully them so that they can't eat the plants that it wants to eat. This dinosaur is trying to fly away, right? Flight. Fight, flight, freeze, and please. These two are collaborating. You do this, then I'll do this, and I won't attack you because we're working on this together, right? You get two reptiles in a hostile business takeover. They're both reptilian, right? Or you can get two hyenas, right? But they'll say, like, we'll kill this small prey together. I'll do this, you'll do that. We'll both cover each other's backs and we'll both split spoils, right? You can see the pact with the United States and Russia, for example, on how to respond to Germany. Germany is behaving in a reptilian way. Russia is behaving in a reptilian way, but you have two reptiles, the British behaving in a reptilian way towards the Germans after World War I. There's a variety of different things, the British Empire throwing its weight around, right? And so we'll make a deal, right? We'll kill this animal by working together. We'll split up Germany, etc., and then we'll go our separate ways. Then we'll fight. But we need each other for now, right? And so this is an enemy, you have a collaboration of enemies. This is all in reptilian behavior. But what we're into now is called the rational reptile. So the next brain and consciousness system is the rational brain. So going back, though, to this thing where everyone in the world is trying to kill and extract energy from everyone else, what is life getting from the reptilian protocol? Now, you can use the metaphor of a championship in sports or a championship in, some hundreds of years ago, the mythological championship of knights. Well, why weren't there female knights? Well, the female body isn't as strong as the male body. So a male sport to see who is the strongest. Like, why would you get together? Why would you get together with long spears and gallop around risking your neck trying to unhorse each other or even kill each other? Why? Why do we do wrestling today? Well, it's the same thing. What we're breeding for is competency. If 100 people from the entire kingdom get together and they all gallop together and clash their spears, The king is going to know who are the top 5 fighters in the entire kingdom. The king is going to know that. And what the knights know is that the king is going to reward those 5 with status, with women, with alcohol, with food, in order to secure their loyalty. I will give you, and the ticket, though, is you've got to unhorse all these other people. Now, you may die. You may be humiliated. So you have to face those fears. But if you're in the top 5, you have a guaranteed rapid escalation. Now, the top 5 that are defending, they don't want to compete. They're getting older. Every year they could be unhorsed, could die, and they've already got it, right? They don't want to compete, right? But the king wants them to compete to see if they've still got it, right? So you've got to defend. You don't get your trophy or your position for a lifetime. You get it for a year. Every year we're going to have a jousting competition. And even the old kings used to be decided in that way, right? Anyone could challenge the king to a duel at any point. That was the protocol. And if you killed the king, you became the king, right? Because the idea was that the strongest people should have power because they would protect the weaker people, right? If you had the strongest people in power, you'd protect the weakest people. Now, you look at this dynamic. Let's make this a tiger, right? So we have a tiger and a deer, right? So here we have a fight-flight protocol in nature. The tiger's hungry and wants to eat a deer. The deer wants to live, so it runs away from the tiger. Now, if the deer are successful at running away, that tiger dies of hunger if that goes on repeatedly. That kills off slow tigers. Now, who ends up succeeding, though? The fast tiger. That catches the deer. So the fast tiger succeeds, the slow tiger dies. Now, if all the slow tigers die off and all the fast tigers get fat and have kids, what happens? You get faster and faster tigers. Now, the same is happening on the side of the deer, right? When a tiger chases a herd of deer, who gets caught in the herd? The elderly, the young, the mentally infirm, the disabled, the stupid. The stupid, the slow, the older, the younger, etc. The least competent within the herd of deer are who get caught by the best of the tigers. Now, when the least competent are killed, who remains to have sex? Who remains to eat the green pasture? The most competent, who are the slowest to die. Now, if you repeat this circle or this cycle 1,000,000 times, and nature repeats it indefinitely, you get faster and faster tigers, and you get faster and smarter deer constantly. Every 1,000,000 years, the tigers get significantly faster and smarter. Every 1,000,000 years, the deer get faster and smarter. And it's a balance, right? Right? Because if too many tigers die off, then the deer herds expand. Nobody kills off the dumb ones. And then lots of dumb ones have children. And pretty soon there's a whole herd of dumb deer that any tiger can catch, right? On the other hand, right, if the tiger gets too good, it stops developing, right? If the tiger, what helps evolution in this cycle is a balance, right? The tiger gets faster, the deer gets faster. The tiger gets smarter at hunting, the deer gets faster and smarter at escaping. And what is happening in both species is a continual increase in competency. Through being predator and prey, both species are becoming more and more competent every generation. Now, the same is true in capitalism, right? Every 10 years, the majority of new businesses go bankrupt, burn out their owners, never get off the ground in the first place. A majority of entrepreneurs say it's just easier to get a regular job for some stupid large corporation doing some meaningless thing than it is to try and convince unintelligent people who are busy about the benefits of this thing and the problem of the status quo. It's just easier to join the status quo. So, right? So what remains? When 80% of the businesses fail, what remains? The top 20%. When 80% of the species fail, what remains? The top 20%. When 80% of the individuals fail to have life-changing impact on their species, what remains? The most competent 20%, right? And so what you can look at with first the instinctive reptilian brain, the irrational instinctive sociopath, and then later the rational sociopath as rationality comes online. In this entire territory of reptilian behavior, whether in capitalism, whether in politics, whether in mating, high school, right? You don't find many teenagers that say, I think you could offer the person I admire and love more than I could, so why don't you form a couplehood and I'll just look on, right? No, it's a cutthroat dynamic, right? Girls in high school that see the person, the man, the girl they like showing interest in someone else, they'll try and trip them up, make them look dumb, etc., to see if that will bring the attention through sociopathic, right? Because when you're in sociopathic territory, you'll find many girls, for example, are attracted to the most powerful, the smartest, the richest, the most aggressive sociopath, right? I win at sports, that's sociopathic, right? We're not talking collaborative, right? You want this, misdirection, this. Sports is sociopathic. The people that win at football, win at various sports, are often given the most sex, right? So sex, women reward competence, which in a sociopathic domain, sports, business, politics, is the winner. Now, the winner in a sociopathic domain is not usually the good person. It's the person smart enough not to get caught, right? So you have in sociopathic dating protocols, the sex goes to the best sociopath. In an alliance that basically says, right, You're the most symmetrical female. You're the most attractive female, the most symmetrical, which is the most healthy to produce children. And of all the women offering themselves to me to fuck, because I'm number one, I'm going to pick the most symmetrical, which happens to be most likely to be healthy. I'm going to want, and why settle for stupidity? I want someone smart, hardworking, beautiful, devious, desirable, right? And I'm going to pick them. And then we're going to breed. And we're going to protect our own. We're sociopaths. We're going to breed. We're going to protect our own. And that's the gene that's going to go forward. The smartest, the most symmetrical, the most powerful, the most ruthless, right? The most willing to win. Well, life throughout this entire rational sociopathic territory is breeding for competence. If you're a better liar, you win. Right? You are more competent. So this is the first stage of life, competence. What life gets out of this is increased probability of survival. The more competent, and we're talking about the top 1%, 99% of all species are dead. 99% of all cultures are dead. Right? We're breeding for competence. Now, the qualities of competence in this case are efficiency, willingness, success, power, skill. That's what life is breeding for in the reptilian age with the reptilian brain and the fight, flight, freeze, please operating system. And this operating system, this brain, this state of consciousness is underlying 80%, let's just say 60% or more. 60% or more of all human behavior has a dominant, let's say 60-40 split, 60% fear, 40% vision, goals, empathy, whatever, right? So if you look at 80% of what 80% of people are doing 80% of the time, you will find that what they are doing is 60% motivated out of fear. And let's pause a moment to understand fear for a moment. All fear is connected to pain. Right? The only thing that we fear is pain. Fear of the unknown, fear of the pain that could be there in the unknown. Fear of the past repeating itself and being painful in the future. Fear of the future. Fear of the present. These people hurt me from time to time. There they are around the corner. I'm scared of being hurt. I'm frightened of pain, right? So we look at that and say, oh, that wouldn't feel good. I could go out. I could be rejected. I'm not going to go out. I could leave my partner that I'm not in love with, but what if I was all alone and had no one, and that would be even worse, and so I'm not going to do it. I could go out and start a company, but what if I'm part of the 80% of people that fail in the next 10 years, and I work harder to make less money and then fail. I don't want to deal with that pain, so I'm just going to stay doing something I'm not very interested in. 80% of people, 80% of the time, are motivated primarily with fear of pain. And this fear of pain is the domain of the reptile. And so this is, it's an important territory to understand. We're going to take a break and we'll come back later.